Welcome back to the $1 million Tipping Point podcast. Today, our guest is Jolene Delisle. And just as a reminder, you can find me, your host, Kiri, at Virtually Kiri on Instagram or Kiri Mohan on LinkedIn. And be sure to join our email community and newsletter, The Tip Jar, where you get sneak peeks on guests who are coming up, tidbits, quotes, key takeaways, and all that good stuff to help you grow your business. And you can find that at Virtually Kiri on Instagram, and the link is in my bio. So again, today we have Jolene Delisle. She's the founder and creative director of the branding and creative agency, The Working Assembly. Her work has been recognized by the Type Directors Club, Print, D&AD, The One Show, Fast Company, as has been named into the Forbes Next 1,000 Entrepreneur list, and in 2022 was Adweek's Creative 100, honoring the most innovative and inspiring individuals. Jolene is passionate about bridging the gender equity and diversity gap in creativity and tech, and launched TWA Labs in 2019 to invest in women and founders of color. As a longtime resident of New York City, she created Local Works to support independent retail business owners in 2020. In 2022, Jolene became the owner of a 1950s ice cream shop in Stone Ridge, New York called Cherries. Wow, so much. Welcome, Jolene. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here too.
First of all, how do you find the time to do all this? I mean, because I know you have a daughter, right?
I have two. I have two kids.
Two kids now. Awesome. How do you find the time? Because I have two kids too, and I don't have that time.
I basically just don't sleep, and I caffeinate a lot. I'm over caffeinated all the time. So yeah, I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, which is tricky ages for sure. I would say I got a lot done when they were much younger. It was a lot easier when they slept more, and a little bit more difficult now that they don't sleep as much.
So do you keep them at home with you then, or are they in daycare or nanny?
Yeah. So during the pandemic, they were home with me, which was very tricky. And we didn't have childcare for 11 months, which was really, really difficult. And now they're back in school. So it's really, It really works a lot better.
Oh, isn't it such a relief?
Huge.
But a problem I've had, to go on a tangent for a second, like my son was born in February. I can't find daycare because of the pandemic. They short-staffed, and they close a lot of the they take less kids.
Yeah.
So it's been a little difficult learning how to work from home with a baby again.
Yeah, very difficult. Yeah, I have to lock. I have 2 different sets of doors I have to work behind so that no one can barge in during meetings and things as well. So it's difficult, but we still have our office as well in Flatiron in Manhattan. Okay. So I do go there a couple of times a week as well.
Oh, good. So I want to talk a little bit about your career, because you have an interesting career path. I read that you were homeless with a single mother. You were in an orphanage at 6 years old. And you also, when you came here, did art therapy, correct? So tell me a little bit about how your journey to entrepreneurship. Did you go to college? How did you get here to be, the Working Assembly, basically?
Yeah, for sure. No, I definitely had challenges, and when I was born and growing up, that, of course, later on, I was able to reflect on and be like, wow, that was difficult, but when I was 6 or 7, that was just kind of my reality. I was fortunate enough to get adopted by 2 wonderful parents who brought me to America. But I didn't know English, and I spoke Korean. And I think for me, art and doing art therapy was kind of my release, and it was my way of communicating with people, because I didn't necessarily have the language to do so, and there was a lot of changes and a lot of things that were going on. So art just became kind of my passion, but also my main form of communication and the way that I kind of work through things as well. And so it was kind of natural when I started thinking about college and what I wanted to do as a professional career. I really loved both language. I went to school for journalism and also for design, and I was able to kind of go into the world of storytelling. I think that's kind of how I landed in the world of advertising, because people who love stories and communications, advertising is a perfect home for them. And so I worked in advertising for the first couple of years of my career, working my way up. I also spent some time working at a design agency. I worked at a retail agency as well, doing kind of retail build outs, and all those different places felt very disparate. And I kind of felt a little lost in my 20s, which I think a lot of people do, where I was like, wow, I've worked in magazines, I worked in ad agencies, I've worked all these different places that don't necessarily feel very linear or connected. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, I kind of thought about all the things I've done and what I was currently doing at the time, which was working way too much, too many hours as a creative director at agency. And I thought about what are the things that I was interested in, what were the different things out of each of the different jobs I had that were interesting to me, that I was most passionate about. And I realized what the connective thread was. I really loved like innovation. I loved brand development. I loved helping like clients in a way that felt really like tangible and like I could see like a result. And I decided to, when I was 3 months pregnant with my daughter, to kind of start the Working Assembly and start working for myself, which was definitely a challenging time. I would not recommend it to everyone to kind of start a business at the same time as being pregnant. But I think when I go back to my kind of origin story of, you know, having a single mom and being and going through that adversity and challenge, I think there's so much as women that we're capable of, and that when there is that kind of adversity that we're able to overcome, and it almost forces you to like find your superpower. And I feel like a little bit like being pregnant was like that for me, where I kind of was able to, you know, just really make it work. And I my first year was really tough, but we also had a really great first year too.
So did you quit your job while you were pregnant, or did you wait?
So what I did was I quit my job as a full-time employee so that I could start a company. And so I went freelance. I kind of went,
Okay.
And so I actually did both. For my first 2 years of Working Assembly, I worked 2 to 3 jobs.
Wow. That is a superpower, like you said, because I think, I don't know if I'd be able to do that, because when I was freelancing, I did it before I got pregnant, and I like kind of
Yeah.
built up a client base and then was able to quit my full-time job when I felt like more secure. But doing that when pregnant, I think a lot of women would struggle with that, you know?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for women who might be at that point where they're like, you know, having their first child or like thinking of growing their family, but also want to follow their dream and start a business? How do they
Yeah.
find that superpower?
Yeah. It's really difficult because this, you know, I think that's one of the issues I have right now with our country is like, we don't support women. We don't support women as much as we should, with, you know, paid leave or, you know, the support that a lot of other countries give from their government to women and founders. And it makes me sad thinking that there's a lot of people who maybe miss out on opportunities to like pursue their dreams based on the fact that they feel like they have to make a concession, whether at home or at work, to make both work. And so for me, I just really, well, one, I have an amazing partner. So I have an amazing husband who is so supportive and really carries equal weight around the house and with the kids and with work. And so that I think is really helpful. And then I've also been able to really kind of find really great support within my team. And they do a lot. So I think it's all about understanding things that you have to do, other things that you want to do, and then figuring out how to prioritize those.
How long did it take you from when you decided to start the Working Assembly to hiring a team and growing your business?
Yeah. So in the first year, so it's interesting. So I had already kind of started the LLC, the Working Assembly, in 2016, technically, because I was using it to essentially freelance. So I kind of used it to freelance and get paid as a consultant. But then I was also taking independent clients that were outside of like agency work. So I was, you know, had 1 or 2 clients, but again, they were like paying me nothing. I was pretty much doing it just to kind of prove out that I could like build a client base and relationships, which, you know, I know people always are kind of saying don't do work for free, but I do think there is some sense of like a value and reputation that you need to build up for yourself as well. And so for me, I felt like more comfortable if I kind of had maybe a lower risk where I wasn't asking someone for so much money, but I was able to kind of contribute and show value and then build those relationships and referrals. That's kind of what I focused on in 2016, 2017. And then in 2017, I hired my first employee. There was just one single designer. She's wonderful. We're still in touch. And then my partner quit his job and also decided to kind of work at the Working Assembly as well. So there was 3 of us that were kind of fully employed at the Working Assembly. And we kept that way for the rest of that year. We hired 2 more people by the end of the year. So I think at the close of 2017, we were maybe like 5 or 6 people. And we had done over $1 million in revenue. So just between the 5 of us, we were really busy.
So that means it took you what, about 2 years to really like, because 2016 to the end of 2017 is when you really started having a solid team, making over 7 figures. Okay, 2 years. That makes sense. So your partner then, he must have some design skills, right? He's not like
yes. He is a design director. He comes from a design background as well. And so we were able to kind of parse out the work. But originally, I mean, when we first started, we were kind of just working out of my apartment and taking clients, and we would rent out conference rooms at WeWorks to meet with clients and, just really try to pitch the work. And we got very lucky in 2017. A big part of why we were able to make kind of that jump and also be able to make hires was we won a very big financial service client, and we wound up doing their rebrand for them, which wound up being, well into 6 figures a project. And so that really helped kind of solidify us as a kind of a formidable agency, and like gave us a lot of clout right away.
Do you think you've had any challenges when hiring and growing your team and expanding? And if so, do you have advice for women who are looking to expand?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've had a couple interesting things happen. Starting the company, I've had clients, especially men who I've met with in VCs out in various parts of the country, want to meet with my partner instead of me, who, he is, he's a partner of the agency, but he's not the founder, but he is a man. And so I would often get calls being like, well, yeah, it's great to meet with you, but, when can I meet, his name's Lawrence. When can I meet Lawrence? I think it's really important for us to talk to him versus just you. There was just a lot of like kind of subtle microaggressions that way I would kind of encounter. The other thing I think that was really challenging with growing a team is that, it's a risk. You're asking people because I was trying to hire, really good talent, to leave their kind of careers and secure jobs to come take a risk and try to build something with you. I think it was really important that I outlined my vision right away as far as, who we were going to try to help, this idea that we wanted to build a company that scaled, but also really was making impact with women and founders of color. And that was going to be a huge part of what we do and how we give back. And I think those type of things really resonate with people that I hired. And so I feel like one of the things I would say if you're starting a company is to have a very clear vision and kind of mission so that you can articulate it. And as you're hiring people and onboarding them, they can have alignment with that. Because I think that's what people are looking for right now.
I want to rewind a hot second to that. People asking to meet with Lawrence. How did you handle that? Like, I mean, when people say like, oh, well, like, what is a nice, polite way? And did you ever lose any possible funding or anything like that? Because if you said like, no, you can't meet him. I don't know what you said, but how did you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging. We actually had that happen pretty recently as well. Myself and someone who's kind of on our management team, we were meeting with a client and they kept on asking if they could meet with other people on the team who they'd be working with. And we kept on giving them, more. We have a very majority women team, so a female team. So we gave them like 2 other names. And they're like, yeah, but is there anyone else? And it kept on it was very clear that they wanted to meet with like men on the team. And it's challenging. I mean, I think for us, it's been a way to weed out clients too. We're completely self-funded, so we don't have to answer to anyone as far as like raising money or in that way. But for clients, it's just been a way for us to weed out cultural fits. We're like, okay, this is not gonna be a cultural fit if you're not comfortable with working and listening to the advisement of women, because that's kind of our team. So in some ways it's actually been beneficial, but in other ways, yeah, for sure, it's definitely hurt our bottom line in some cases when I've had to politely be like, well, I'm sorry, he's not available. This is the team that you're going to be working with. So it's important that you get to know them and us. And yeah, we've definitely gotten like ghosted by some clients.
That's still shocking to me today. I mean, I shouldn't be, but I guess I mean, I am. I think I'm lucky. You're lucky. We live in very progressive parts of the country, but there are times where I'm just like, really? These
Yeah,
stories still happen?
for
Really?
sure, for sure.
So talk to me a little bit about the other branches of your business in the working assembly, specifically Local Works, TWA Labs, and even your ice cream shop, if you want to talk about that.
So I mean, I started the working assembly with a real clear mission that I wanted to work with underrepresented founders and women, knowing that founders of color and women are often the least funded. They have the least access to support, and branding and creativity, I think, is a huge aspect of building a brand. So I wanted to make sure that that was always an accessible price point, but it's very difficult to scale a company when you're kind of giving projects away and at 75% or 80% discount of what your normal charge would be to other clients. So we did have to balance out what we hoped to do with what we needed to do, which wound up being taking on larger clients, clients with more money, clients across multiple sectors, including B2B. But I knew that as we started getting more footing into the working assembly, I wanted to make sure that we still made that a clear point of our mission and our time that we were spending. So I started TWA Labs pretty early on in 2019 with the idea that I wanted to provide advisement, equity, and receive equity to kind of have long-term relationships with clients. Now we have 17 companies that I advise and that we've invested in. They're all part of Labs. We also offer a very big discount to, so typically our fees are much higher, but we offer a 10K fee to clients who are just starting out, that they essentially get like brand development for that price, and they're able to kind of jumpstart their business. And we've seen the clients that we have helped across those 17 all raised almost $20 million. So
Oh, wow.
It's been really impactful, and we are excited about that. And actually this coming year, this is actually news, I haven't shared that publicly, we're actually turning TWA Labs into Assembly Ventures, which is going to be a private equity fund. So I'm going to actually get into private equity and really shift my focus from, I'll split my focus between the working assembly and also Assembly Ventures, where that will be kind of a fund and be investing with like larger check sizes to founders.
How does that even work? Because I don't know how that works, to be honest. Like, how do you take this TWA Labs and then turn it into a funding company or VC company?
Yeah. So, I've obviously always been interested in private equity and VC venture capital, and it's been something I've been playing around with as an idea. I thought for a while about joining a venture capital firm, even as like a part-time, to like really see what that was like. I've done some angel investing, which is what I would call TWA Labs, has really been focused more on angel investing. And I wanted to kind of formalize it. I realized that like, yes, there's some impact we can make with brand development and working with founders and trying to create diversity and inclusivity within that landscape. But creative support can only go so far. I think capital really helps make that difference. And so I started fundraising this past summer to try to raise money to essentially create my fund. So I have investors who are essentially giving me money to then be able to identify like the next, consumer community and, tech companies that are going to be the new companies of tomorrow.
Does it make you nervous? Like knowing that you're going to be giving this money and hoping, like, cause you read stories, right? Like I was reading a story the other day of like Kevin O'Leary, of course, like Shark Tank, everyone thinks of them when they think of like investments, but like this guy just blowing through his money, and he didn't list who it was, but I'm just like, oh
no. I mean, I think one of the things that has been really beneficial to me from a career standpoint, and I know we talked a little bit about my early childhood, has been that like I think of everything in my life as like a bonus. Like I'm so grateful that I get to do anything that I get to do every day. It's all things that, if you really look at my life map, should probably never have been something that I'm able to do. And so for me, I'm not risk averse because I feel like I've kind of seen what the other side is. And so everything to me is like an upside. And I feel really lucky and fortunate that I'm able to even be in the position I am where like that's a challenge. So I get excited about doing things that are scary to people. And I like extending myself and trying to make the most of the time that I have.
Did you ever reach a moment with all this that you were like, oh, this is a failure, I shouldn't have done this? Not even like the working a summer, but just like something specific where you just like, oh.
This past summer has been really challenging because, to your point, I bought an ice cream store this past year. I would live during the pandemic outside the city. I have a house outside the city, and that was a weekend house. It was like a dream of mine to buy something outside the city, and we were fortunate enough to do it in 2020. We closed in January 2020. The pandemic was, February, March of 2020, and this place that was meant to be like this, like amazing retreat and a place of inspiration and creativity wound up becoming like my shelter and like my like panic room. And so I kind of had this like association with it that was like really negative. And I drove by this ice cream shop all the time on this highway up there called Route 209, and I would see it, and it was like only one of the only businesses that stayed open through the pandemic. And it has been selling ice cream for 75 years. And I know it's been through like 3 or 4 different families. I always admired the person who owned it. And I was like, wow, that's really amazing. She's doing great. I would love to do that someday. And I had mentioned it to a realtor friend and said, wow, like, I would love to like buy a business up here. I'd love to be able to contribute to the community. I'd love to meet people. I feel so isolated in my house. I bought this place. It was a big mistake. And she was like, well, that ice cream store exists. It's called Cherries. She's like, it already exists. Everyone knows it. Like, you can't build a competing business. Like, it wouldn't be good. And then a couple months later, she called me and she said, hey, remember when you talked about Cherries and how you wanted to buy it? She's like, it actually just went for sale. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to buy it. So,
oh my gosh.
And so the next day I went in, I put an offer, and she accepted my offer the next week. And we closed this past April, and I said, well, we need to open by May because that's ice cream season. We don't want to like miss it. And so we scrambled for the next 4 weeks to get it ready. We renovated it, kind of transferred everything over, changed it, had to figure out how to make ice cream, how to distribute ice cream. I wanted to make sure like all the products were really good and, didn't have any corn syrup and artificial ingredients. And it was really important to me that like we created something that felt like reflective of like our values. And so I will say this summer was one where I was like, did I do too much? Because it was like the ice cream shop I was raising for my fund. I have the agency, and I did get to a point, I think, especially right before my kids started going back to school this week, where I was like, I bit off too much this time. I might not be able to make it, but as with everything, I just kind of pushed through and it worked out.
So do you think that like that ability to say yes and that ability to jump and say, I'm going to do this, is that from then your background, what you're saying? Just like, because you kind of say like everything is a blessing, and so you're not really risk averse. But do you think that also comes from your background, this ability to just say like, yeah, I'm going to do this and we'll figure it out and we'll see what happens?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people who talk about things that they want to do, and I'm definitely an action person. So I like to talk about it and think about it, but I also am someone who realizes that action is like 80% of getting anything done. So I love to dream and to explore and think, but I also really pride myself in being able to get the work done. So I think maybe some people would have kind of dreamt about owning an ice cream store but never done it. And for me, I think that's like one of the things I'm really good at, is kind of mapping it out in my mind and just being able to like understand how to get something done.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that. And I definitely do. But I think what's interesting about the story about the ice cream shop is that it's so unrelated to what you're doing. And that's what's so fascinating, that you're able to say, I'm just going to do it. Because there's things I want to do that's so unrelated to what I do.
Yeah.
But I think there's a little bit of that fear of like, that's holding me back. That's like, A, I don't have the time. B, I have no idea what I'm doing. So that's going to take even more of my time because I have to learn everything. So just the fact that you're able to jump first, ask questions later, I think is really admirable. Really.
Yeah. And it does feel somewhat disconnected, but in some ways it's actually almost like full circle for me. I wanted to create a space that, so it's an ice cream store, but I'm also building a building next to it that's going to be a community art center. And I'm going to be giving out art classes to kids in the community. So, obviously public school funding has dramatically cut arts programs. And so to create a space that gives free art classes and brings in people from the city to kind of do art workshops is something that I really want to do. And so it will be unrelated, but it's somewhat related too, because I think like ultimately, like I really do believe in like giving back and figuring out how to do things that are both like commerce and profitable and entrepreneurial, but also like has kind of resonates with me as far as on a personal level, like things I ultimately want to do, which is like leave the world and leave a community better than when I found it.
And kids love ice cream.
And kids love ice cream.
So they'll just go from the classes to the ice cream store.
Exactly. Yeah.
Win-win. So you said that you made your first 7 figures within 2 years. How do you balance now, especially when we're talking so much about investments, right? Like, how do you balance that making money and the spending money? And did you ever have these months in the red? And did that freak you out? Like, how did you manage that?
Well, it's actually interesting. We used to get paid on time and always have money in our bank account and not have like that concern when we had lower payroll. And we also had, clients that were just, smaller and the payment terms were more flexible. And so I think it's actually been trickier this year than ever before in that we have bigger clients who have 90-day payment terms, which is so impossible for small businesses because you're just like, 3 months without payment is just really, really tricky for us. Like it's just really hard. And our payroll is higher than ever because now we have, over 35 employees. And so it's just, it becomes very, very difficult, I think, as you get bigger and scale. And for me, I feel like the kind of cliff I'm at now is like this next level where it's like, I'm no longer a super tiny small business, but I'm also now a large business. I'm kind of in this like middle area. And it actually is like the hardest area I've been in so far.
And how do you deal with that with your mindset, going to work every day, knowing like, oh, it's going to be 90 days until I get that big payment?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I have moments where I panic and I have an amazing financial advisor. I have an amazing person who runs our books at the agency, who does like kind of our financial and operations. And so I definitely have moments where I panic and email them and say, should we apply for a line of credit? Should we apply for a loan? What should we do? And then I hope that it all works out. I wish I had better. I'm like, I need more strategy than just hope and a prayer, but that's kind of what I do sometimes.
I tend to do that too. Don't worry about it. I do tend to be like, well, I'm going to wing it and hopefully it all works out.
Yeah.
What do you think has been the hardest part or point for your business in the past 6-7 years?
I think definitely learning how to like manage people. I definitely made some bumpy errors in the beginning. I think I was trying to do a lot and not prioritize like people as much. I think that's when you're building a company, like oftentimes so much other stuff gets in the way, like of that focus and priority where I was so focused on my family life at home. I was so focused on paying the rent, paying, for the office. I was, getting client work done. And, I was hiring very young people, my first couple years who needed a lot of guidance and mentorship and were making that jump to come work with me. And I think that not that I didn't value it, but I just wasn't able to give like the time that I needed to really grow and mentor like a team in that way. And I think now I've had the luxury of having more people, so I'm able to give more time to like those type of things. But I think that's one of the things that's really tricky is like, how do you grow a team in a way that feels like scalable and sustainable, but also doesn't compromise on like, what you ultimately want to do, which is like provide that right mentorship and guidance. A lot of that time was me just like putting out fires and, it's difficult to grow a team that way.
And so how has that changed? How do you think now what are you doing that's better for your team?
What's better now is that I'm not trying to do everything. Before I was like, I was billing, payments, scope of work. I had to do, every contract. I was also doing the creative work. I was also doing creative direction. I was doing production. I was literally wearing just essentially way too many hats. And I think now that our company has gotten a little bigger, I'm able to divvy up those hats. Of course, like I'm still like seeing them and like, and involved, but it's just less. I just have more help, which I think is like, of course, a luxury at this point, but was really difficult. It was really hard. And people are not forgiving of women. I mean, sometimes women are the hardest on other women. And, you know, I had a lot of young women on my team who I think were very like let down by me because they thought like, oh, I'm coming to work for this person. I'm going to spend all this time with her and learn everything from her. And I'm like, hey, I can give you 5 minutes because like that's all I have right now. And it's hard. You know, you don't want to feel like you're letting people down.
Are you hoping to leave some like legacy for your daughter, or do you have two daughters? I don't know if it's two
I have a
daughters or one.
daughter and a son.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you hoping to leave some kind of legacy for your kids and like show them like how are you I'm trying to phrase this the right way because it's like you're such a strong advocate for women, and I can tell that even just from this conversation. How are you hoping to bring up your kids so that they're also such strong advocates for women?
Yeah, I think it's super important to me that my daughter realizes like, and she does know already that I work really hard. And that I work a lot. And I think, you know, at times it's become challenging for her. She doesn't love it because she wants me to spend all my time playing with her and being with her. And, you know, I've had to make concessions where I'm not always able to do pick up and drop off because it's just impossible. It's like in the middle of the day and I have a meeting and a call and I can't get out of the house. And so I need someone else to go pick her up. So that's tough because she's like, you know, she knows there are some moms who are there all the time and like I'm not, and that's difficult. But I've also had moments where I'm like super like excited because I can already see like I'll tell you this story. At her birthday party, a mom actually came up to me and she was like, hey, like I know like times are tough right now. If you ever need any help, just like let me know. And I was like, oh, like thank you. What do you mean? And she was like, oh, Emerson told all the kids at school that you got a job working at an ice cream store at night because you also are like, you know, you have your 2 jobs during the day and like you're working at night and like that you have to like, you know, leave at night sometimes to work. And I was like, and I understood like in her mind, like she was just super proud that I had like all these jobs. And so, you know, in some ways, and like it was like completely mortifying, but in other ways, I'm just like, this is also awesome because she realizes how much like I have a work ethic and like how important that is. So like at times I'm just like, oh, super proud because like this is just, you know, great that she's like getting that example and seeing it. So for me, I have no intention of like really, I think for kids, I don't believe in like leaving them like trusts or anything like that. I think for me, like I want her to like really work her way up as well. I put myself through college. I worked 2 jobs. I worked as a waitress. I worked as a bartender. I kept those jobs until I was 27 so I could pay off my student loans. So for me, like, I think all that experience I had and like life experience of like just literally doing everything for myself, you know, my parents never gave me any money and didn't pay for college, was really a big deal. And it taught me a lot. So I just never want her to think that she has like a safety net in any way. So I think that's also really important because I see, especially living in Manhattan and, you know, in New York City where, you know, there is that, some people who have so much money and some people, you know, who don't. I definitely want to be kind of more on the side of like her realizing like she has to kind of make it on her own.
Mm-hmm. I have a 6-year-old daughter, and actually I struggle too, especially since I've worked from home for like 7 years, the balance between playing and working. And what I actually started to do, and I don't know if this will help at all, but I tell her that work is like fun for me, right? Like, so I'll be like, you know, it's so fun for you to go to the playground and fun for you to play with this or do this. This is what's fun for mom. Like, this is so fun for me to sit down here. And then it helped her kind of understand it more. Because if I was just like, oh, I have to work,
Yeah,
they don't have concept of that at that age at all. But they do have a concept of fun.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, it's so interesting you said like I have to work because one of the things I try to teach my kids all the time is like a gratitude mindset. So I always say like I get to go to work, I get to go to you get to go to school. And I think it really changes your perspective of your day when you think about like, at least for me, like just that gratitude of like, wow, I get to do all these things. I get to meet new clients today. I get to, you know, work with my team, you know, and it really shifts my mindset a lot, you know, and I think it helps the kids too.
Yeah, I like that. Do you have any advice for women as they start to grow their business? I mean, you've already given us quite a bit, but if you could distill it down, what do you think is some advice you would give? And also like, why do you think some women hit roadblocks? Like what could be holding them back?
Yeah, I definitely think that. So one of the things I kind of think about a lot is this concept of everything to achieve and nothing to prove. I think that when I was younger, I felt very outside of my environment, right? I grew up in an environment where my family didn't look like me. Everyone at school didn't look like me. I always felt kind of on the outside. And I, even in my 20s, like I said, I kind of struggled with kind of what I wanted to do ultimately work-wise. And it felt very much like I was kind of meandering. I didn't have a path. And oftentimes I looked to like other people and they kind of thought like, oh, like I need to do this because they're doing this. And I spent so much time and I honestly wasted a lot of time, like just trying to think about how I could prove to other people that I was like worthy and I was able to, was worthy of their time or attention or like of even just being here. And I think once I realized I could release that, because that was all just in my head, it kind of opened it up where everything in my life, I could just shift my focus to just like, what can I achieve? Like, what can I actually make happen? And I think oftentimes like we get into like this comparison model, and I find myself still in it sometimes too, with like parents and other businesses, because there's definitely more I want to achieve too. But I'm no longer achieving it based on like what I think I should do or what like I think people expect me to do, but more so on like what I want. So it's why maybe like buying an ice cream store, starting a VC fund, and having agency all doesn't look like it makes sense, but like it's all things that like I want to do. And I feel like once I release myself of that expectation, it like just opened my whole life up.
Yeah, I like that. Well, thank you for sharing your story. Can you tell us where our listeners can find you if they want to find you online or social media?
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. You can find me at Jolene Delisle on LinkedIn. And then also our Instagram is Working Assembly.
Great. What is one philosophy, mantra, or quote that you try to run your business by?
I think it's just this idea of like, work hard and be nice to people. I think like it's such a simple statement, but I do think like doing the work is half of it, but the other part is just kindness. Like I've grown my business completely on referrals. We haven't, kind of pitched out work or done any cold calls. It's just all been people who've kind of referred us from other relationships. And I think oftentimes when you go into a relationship thinking like, what can I get out of this? Or versus what can I contribute and like really be additive to a process, it shifts, right? So when I go into a meeting and I think like, instead of like, what can I get from this person? I think about what can I provide to this person? I think it just shifts that relationship. And that's why those relationships have now like kind of been able to like grow and people want to like refer us to business. And it's been like game changing for us.
Yeah. And one thing you said earlier is like how you would take clients on in the beginning for less money and not charge as much. And I actually do recommend that to young entrepreneurs, is saying, I know people say, you should always charge money. And I agree with that. Like you shouldn't work for free, but at the same time, there's a lot of power in a testimonial and word of mouth. So if you can instead maybe have 100%. Them, refer you or write a testimonial for your webpage or your LinkedIn profile or something like that, that is also gold.
I agree. I 100% agree. And I think like people will always remember, remember how you made them feel and how like that interaction was. And I think that is, to your point, like sometimes even more valuable than like any payment you can get.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your advice. And I hope that obviously we'll put everything in the show notes for how people can contact you and get in touch. And I hope that, your ice cream store thrives. And I hope that you get that building next to it and you have an art store. And if you want us to like promote that at all, I'd be happy to.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking your time.
Thank you.